And joining us to discuss the Nigerian business environment and the strategy of American lender Citi in Africa's largest economy is Omar Hafeez, the CEO of Citi Nigeria. Thank you very much, Omar, for joining us. It's great to have you in the studios today. So we're going to talk a bit about Americans' interest in Nigeria, but let's start first of all by getting your thoughts on the market. We've talked a lot about the banking sector. You're obviously a player there. I know you're quite skewed towards the large corporates, but your take on the current business environment for banks right now.
Well, I think it's clear that post the crisis, banks have come out stronger. I think the way we look at it is that not only are they stronger from a capital standpoint and a cleaner balance sheet, but also from a governance standpoint. And I think that's the big change. The big change is that governance has come top of the list of things to do. And I think that bodes well for the market. So the way I look at it is that all the opportunities that are coming out, whether in oil and gas or power or whatever, I think we are well primed in Nigeria to take ownership of those opportunities. And as I look out, I see several of the banks going out trying to raise capital, I think preempting the opportunities that will come down the road.
But let's focus on Citi right now and how you're playing this market. I mentioned earlier, I mean, traditionally, everyone has said Citi is very focused on the institutions, the large corporates, and I imagine that is still the case. But is that still a good place to be? Because many people talk about the margins in that space. I mean, how do you play that space profitably going forward?
Well, we played well, I think, and we played very profitably. I think that the opportunity is constantly shifting. So it's not as if you can look at a market and say, oh, it's getting exhausted. I think the fact that the market is moving towards more sophisticated products plays to our strength. I think generically any market that is moving up the curve plays to our strength, because we have the product offering which is global, and it's a matter of tailoring that for the local markets that we're in. So I think when I look at Nigeria, and I've been here several years, I see opportunities in various sectors. Obviously oil and gas is a big part of what we want to do in the country and what we already do in the country. Of course there's a shift away from IOCs to the local Nigerian companies, so that's an interesting shift. I think banks are big clients of ours, and as they go out to look for money, whether through the Eurobond market or otherwise, I think we can play a big role there, and we are playing a big role there. And then of course equities will follow. I mean, you heard about the Seplat listing recently. We were book runners on that transaction. We probably see more come out there. So I think the market is shifting in a manner where I think business opportunities are going to be adequate for us.
Now, what about the interest of American businesses? Of course, there's been so much made about Nigeria now being the largest economy in Africa. I imagine that's wonderful advertisement for this economy, and perhaps a lot more interest as we become clearly spotted on the African map. So are you seeing a little more interest this year in Nigeria as opposed to, say, last year?
Look, I think Nigeria is not a secret. So when you go out on the road and meet investors, you will get very specific questions about what's happening in the country. So, I mean, to the extent that investors will know information like how staggered are the deputy governor's stints in the central bank.
Oh, really?
When they look at policy making and they say they look at consistency of policy, they're that well informed. So I think Nigeria was always known. I think the 500 billion is great because I think from for example, a debt to GDP perspective, you have a lot more fiscal room to play with. Obviously, tax to GDP is another issue which also gets impacted, but I think it's a known item, and I think the 500 adds to it because it makes it look even more attractive. But to be honest, Citi's been here 30 years, and we've always known that this is a great market to be in, and I think others are catching on now. And it's a number 500, but of course it does add to the flavor for sure, as do the demographics. The numbers just come out, but the 170 million people have always been has been a great incentive, especially in the FMCG space, to play in Nigeria.
But speaking more specifically around American interest, clearly we have American oil companies here. We saw GE commit to invest $1 billion in Nigeria over 5 years. Are you expecting to see those type of announcements becoming a little more common going forward, given the size of the economy, given the issues you've just talked about, the demographics, the interest that many investors are showing there?
Yes, well, absolutely. I mean, we are in a position where we intermediate that information, right? So we see the information coming in from all over, not just the US, but everywhere, and the US as well, and we know who's showing interest in the market. So I would expect that to continue, even from, not only from a pure portfolio flow and FDI perspective, but I'm actually seeing a lot of M&A opportunities in the market where investors are looking to make a longer term play in Nigeria.
Right.
I would expect this news to continue, and of course there are challenges in all markets, but irrespective of the challenges, I think Nigeria is going to remain very attractive for investors.
I was speaking to the head of Sub-Saharan Africa for Citi while I was at the World Economic Forum, and he made it clear that Citi's strategy is not likely to change significantly. But is it going to change at all in Nigeria? I mean, are you going to shift your focus at any point? I mean, like I said earlier, it really has been a case of focus on the large corporates providing investment advisory, investment banking services. Are you moving anywhere closer to the SME space, for instance, that we're seeing a lot more Nigerian banks being focused on now?
Look, our strategy needs to be dynamic. So what was valid 10 years ago is not valid today. So as we look forward, clearly Citibank in Nigeria, we've been here 30 years, Nigeria is clearly a focus country for Citibank. So therefore status quo cannot remain. But status quo changing doesn't mean we suddenly enter several markets that we don't have a core competence in. Right. Anything we do will be aligned to our core competence. And therefore, the opportunity space I see is really the shifting of the market. Not necessarily new markets, the shifting of the market. So as we said, the local players in the oil and gas industry, the service providers to that industry, I don't think they're really SME, but there are some names there that are supplying to these companies.
Right.
So that kind of shift in our strategy will remain. We will also look at a couple of new businesses in Nigeria for sure, and you will hear about that sooner than anybody else will, we'll make sure. But yes, there is going to be a little bit of a movement. But I think as the market becomes conducive to a retail space, I wouldn't say it's not on the cards. All I would say is that we're watching that space, and when we think it's right, I think we already have the product offering to bring it in.
Right. We need to talk, of course, about security. It's a big issue in Nigeria these days. And how is that impacting how you view these markets? Many people argue that the problem is really isolated to the north. Some suggest that it could possibly come this way to the south. Your take on that point?
Well, I think having been here for 30 years positions us very well, so we can communicate. If we were just landing here off a plane from somewhere in the developed world, I think one would be concerned, right? I think having been here and have that knowledge on the ground is very, very important, and then we can convince people that things are what they are. Look, I don't think we can ignore the challenges. I think we need to know what's going on. We need to know where it's limited. But I tell you, I was in Gombe a couple of weeks ago, so I must
which is in the north.
Which is in the north, because we're looking to finance one of the plants over there. So I think it has to be measured. I don't think we need to exaggerate the issue, but I think that it's clear that that any escalation away from where it is would have consequences. All right.